We're just jumping on now. Once again, I'm Kirsten Larson-Muth. I'm the CEO of JLI, and I'm delighted to open this session. The Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities is an international collaboration that focuses on evidence for the full and appropriate faith actor engagement in development and humanitarian action. We invite you to join the Meal Hub, and I'm delighted to introduce the launch of this compendium, which I see as a really important contribution to advancing the understanding of faith perspectives on meal, and it's informative to faith actors themselves, as well as non-faith actors who are seeking better partnerships with faith. If you have questions or want to learn more, please visit our website at jliflc.com, and you can join the Meal Hub specifically at meal.jliflc. I'd like to thank the co-chairs of the Hub, Dan Williams at Hope International and Bilal Aslam at Islamic Relief USA. And I'd also like to express our gratitude for the sponsors of the event and who are also members of the Hub, the Accord Network Research Alliance, Adyan Foundation, Africa Youth Leadership Development and Health Initiative, the Christian Journal for Global Health, Hope International, Islamic Relief USA, and KAICIID. Our moderator today is Professor Mohammed Abu-Nimer. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking very well today. Senior advisor at the KAICIID Dialogue Center and professor at International Peace and Conflict Resolution at American University. He has served as the founder and director of Salam Institute for Peace and Justice and is the co-founder of the Journal of Peacebuilding and Development. He has worked for over 3 decades in a number of conflict areas that include the Middle East, Chad, Niger, Mindanao, and Sri Lanka on issues related to conflict resolution, Islamic models of peacebuilding, interreligious dialogue, civic education, forgiveness and reconciliation, and has established the evaluation of peace-building programs. He has published many scholarly books and articles, most recently, Making Peace with Faith. He is also one of our JLI board members. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mohammed.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten. Can you hear me here?
Yes, we can.
Terrific, thank you. Thank you for your introduction. Thank you for the welcoming. Looking forward for this this meeting, and thanks for, of course, the JLI for hosting the launch, as well as working on the compendium of good practice, especially in advancing the monitoring and accountability learning theme or area in general. This publication is important because it highlights, the good practice in how do we conduct monitoring, evaluation, and accountability, but within a framework of learning, and not necessarily only to satisfy donors or to satisfy other factors or agencies. And it's important that we in the faith-based organizations and community address this issue and try to make sure that we are all growing, learning as a result of our work. And this is really the main objective of this publication. The drafting process and also the launching is to move in this direction, move the field of interfaith and development, faith and development, and peace building into that direction. 31 interviews with representatives from secular and faith-based international organizations and academics were really interviewed in order to compose this information and make it available and share to the field. There are a number of cases, and those were showed in 10 cases at least, and this is only select group. Of course, there were other cases as well, and I'm sure among many of you who are with us in this webinar or launch, you have your own cases, and I hope you'll be able to share it via chat or even speak about it. So I look forward for our short meeting this. So the agenda is really to have Jennifer Philippa Eggert to do the introduction of the compendium itself, so we all have some common base knowledge of it. For those of us who did not see it or a few, and then we'll have the panel discussion, short presentation of the stories of a change from 3 organizations or 3 cases, and then we have 2 colleagues who will provide the discussant, will be the discussant, and we will end with the question and answers from you as well. So I think we should move forward so we don't take more time from our speaker and our cases as well. Jennifer Philippa Eggert, Senior Research Associate at the JLI. The floor is yours, and please give us some summary of this compendium.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, and hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may be based. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to share a little bit of background about the research process that led to this compendium with you. I was the lead researcher on the project, supported by an amazing team, including notably the research director of JLI, Olivia Wilkinson. But there were lots of other people who were pulling strings and providing input behind the scenes. So the whole process started in the JLI Meal Hub, which, as Kirsten and Mohammed have mentioned in the beginning, are learning hubs that are part of the JLI, where practitioners and academics with an interest in a specific topic as it relates to faith and engagement with faith actors come together to share learning and collect evidence. So the idea for the compendium emerged from the Meal Hub, which said we need evidence on how we can do meal better in partnerships between local faith actors on the one side and international actors on the other, which could be internationally operating organizations, secular or faith-based, or donors, so really quite a broad spectrum. So that was the idea, that's how it all started. And then we issued a call for case study submissions. We received a couple, but the majority of them were from Western, US-based Christian organizations. And they were sharing really interesting stuff about how they do meal differently with local faith actors, but we felt that something was missing. So we started reaching out to non-Christian and non-Western organizations, had really interesting conversations with Hindu representatives of Hindu organizations, Islamic organizations, people with a Sikh background, Buddhist organizations. And that's when some of the challenges of doing meal as a faith actor emerged. We dug even deeper, and it turned out that there are organizations that do the kind of work that we're looking at. But when I asked them about meal, they looked at me and said, Jennifer, what are you talking about? We don't do meal. What is meal? We don't do meal. We don't need meal. We're not interested in meal. And that's when we thought that the conversation started to become really interesting. Because yes, we could have just written a compendium about how to do meal better in these partnerships between local faith actors on the one side and international actors on the other. But we were also interested in who is not part of these practices and of these debates, and who is excluded, who decides not to participate, or who actually does stuff that is really interesting, but they frame it differently. So that's what we were really interested in. And it was when we started digging a bit deeper and going beyond what we had originally planned to do with the compendium, that's when the conversation started to be really, really interesting. We hope that the final version of the compendium reflects this process and shows the diversity of ways in which different organizations of different backgrounds in different parts of the world engage with this question. We hope that there's a little bit of a little bit in for everyone, almost everyone. When we're asking ourselves what is the target audience, it's actually quite a broad target audience. So we hope that people who do meal with face actors, like Western style meal, that they find some more ideas of how to do this better. But we also hope to move the conversation one step further and really question if the end goal of all that we're doing here is for everyone to adopt Western style meal, or is there maybe space for something else as well? So quite interesting conversations, I think. Really excited to hear from the panel and then our discussions after that. And of course, from all of you who have joined us in this event today, really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and getting your feedback on the work that we have done and on next steps. What do you think should come as a next step?
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Indeed, the 3 points maybe we'll leave you with is this issue of the need for, or the recognition, the need for meal, and meal is not about food, the meal about different sort of food. Meal is about the monitoring, evaluation, and accountability. To what extent faith-based organizations working in this field recognize and have the resources or dealing with this? That's the awareness and that's the recognition. The second question really is the issue of what are the models, approaches, the framing of this, how do we do those evaluation? And there is a concept of Western approaches versus non-Western approaches that has been put in the compendium as well as in Jennifer conversation. And it will be interesting to get some responses of what does that mean from you and your experience. Let me just move with Maria Dao, a community engagement coordinator from Adyan Foundation in Lebanon, an organization that does interfaith dialogue as well as faith and development work in the context of Lebanon and the Arab region as well, and I think moving globally even or internationally. You will see Maria Dao more bio in the chat. I will not read it. So Maria, the floor is yours. You have about 5 to 6 minutes to present the case and your experience. Thank you again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Abu-Nimer, and thank you, JLI, for having me and for bringing together these stories of change from all over the world. Before sharing our meal experience, allow me first to briefly introduce Adyan Foundation and the Forum for Religious Social Responsibility. Adyan Foundation for Diversity, Solidarity, and Human Dignity works on projects locally in Lebanon, regionally in the Middle East and North Africa, and internationally for solidarity, humanity, human dignity, and diversity. Through, of course, different projects in education, media, policymaking, and intercultural and interreligious dialogue. Among one of Adyan's main networks is the Forum for Religious Social Responsibility, which was launched in March 2019. It creates its platform for over 100 religious leaders, educators, and media professionals from diverse religious backgrounds to share knowledge, interact, exchange experiences, and implement community service initiatives. And another important component of the project is the Ta'adudiyya platform, which contains also content on pluralism and diversity in Arabic online and gives our forum members greater reach and allows them to share positive and inclusive religious narratives. Due to the diverse types of activities implemented within the forum, as I have already mentioned, the project team and the Department of International Relations at Adyan Foundation developed a comprehensive meal plan to try to measure in 2020 the impact and the attitudinal and behavioral changes attributed to the forum since its launch in 2019. As most of you are aware, whenever we speak about impact evaluation, we feel that it is scary, we feel that it is challenging, and we feel that it is quite impossible, especially when we're measuring it over a short time frame. However, through incorporating an array of qualitative and quantitative M&E tools, the organization was able to relatively measure the impact of the project and try to understand its level of contribution to shifting attitudes towards religious social responsibility and social cohesion. In order to better explain or share the tools with you, I will use the IMPACT acronym. So I tried to take the word impact and I will try to use it as well in the following way. I for information, M for measurement, P for presentation, A for accountability, C for challenges, and T for transfer. I will start with information. Because Adyan employs different quantitative and qualitative tools, as we have already discussed, to collect data, data triangulation allows the team to form an inclusive and reliable understanding of the community it is working with. So I will share how we collect this data through 4 tools within the Forum project. First, through quarterly e-surveys, which are basically used to track changes in knowledge or in attitudes towards a certain concept, event, or activity. They are shared with our Forum members on a quarterly basis, so every 3 months. Some questions change depending on the situation or the current events, and some questions remain the same in order for us to try to track these changes in knowledge, these changes in information, or these changes in attitudes. The second tool is the focus group discussion, and it is basically used to examine the impact of the forum and its activities on communities and individuals. We were able to have 12 focus groups all over Lebanon, in Beirut, to the north, the south, Gakkai region, North Mount Lebanon, and South Mount Lebanon, all different regions in Lebanon. We had a total of 12 focus groups, 6 engaged groups with members reached by the forum's activities, and 6 control groups. The discussions within these focus groups mainly focused on participants' understanding of hate speech and the reaction to negative as well as positive online messages which were targeted by ta'adudiyya content. It also aimed to capture changes in attitudes and behaviors recorded among community members and their family members and friends as well. So basically the focus group discussions try to understand how people outside the forum or who were affected by the forum members view topics or view things related to hate speech and other concepts that we work on in the forum. The third tool is the stories of change, which are collected from forum members and by forum members themselves, either through the implementation of community service initiatives or any other activities, or through the reactions to social media posts. It is important for us to have the forum members participate in the collection of stories of change for 2 main reasons. One is that it provides them with a tangible, if you want, measurement of change, so they can see what kind of change they are causing, and it provides them as well with an emotional award, because as you know, this type of works needs people to feel that they are doing in fact something. And the fourth and last tool is the impact study of ta'adudiyya platform to measure the offline impact of our online work. The collection and analysis is being done by an external company and will be analyzed by Adyan's team, including the media department, and this will be used to inform the next steps of our work. The second tool, I will be brief, is the measurement and analysis. This is to say that all gathered data is studied and analyzed by more than one member to ensure objectivity. It is being analyzed in a multidisciplinary approach, and it is mainly disaggregated by gender, age, and location whenever possible in order to ensure inclusivity. The third is presentation. The information is presented to the team and donors, our partners, the British Embassy, on a quarterly basis through an array of tools, including PowerPoint presentation, reports, case studies, and discussion groups. Fourth point is accountability. As I said, information is shared internally with the CEO, the Department of International Relations, and with our beneficiaries as well. And usually we use these meal activities in order to enhance the project designs for the coming years and to find innovative and adaptive ways to respond to the needs of our beneficiaries. And last but not least, the challenges. Basically, I will focus on three main challenges: the difficulty to continuously measure the change in behavior, because we cannot really ensure that this change is permanent. We cannot ensure that this change is not that people are not going to go back to what they were after certain incidents. So this is a challenge, the variety of change. We also have a limited human resources because we're covering technically a large geographical area. We have difficulty in involving forum members in meal all the time. And also, regardless of the fact that we try to be as objective as possible, it's kind of hard to really have always unbiased results. And the last is transfer through the meal newsletter that we share with our partners on a quarterly basis, and our participation in similar events. In conclusion, I just want to say that meal is a comprehensive process that should always be adapted based on the project and its beneficiaries. I think there is no right and wrong. There is just what works and what doesn't in a certain context. Thank you.
I'm muted. Sorry. Thank you, Anne-Maria. Thank you for the presentation, for the 5 points you made, and also going through the classic stages of doing an evaluation in that sense. Would have been also good at some point. Maybe you can put on the chat, to highlight 4 or 5 of the outcomes that you receive for those who, or 2, 3 main outcomes you receive for those who do not go through the compendium or have no access for it. But feel free to use the chat to do so. Thank you again. Our second case or speaker is Daryn Go from the Christian Ministry in Philippines. You can see her biography in the chat as well. So thank you for joining us. The floor, Daryn, the floor is yours, please.
Good evening, everyone from the Philippines. I am Daryn Go, and today I will be representing International Care Ministries. So International Care Ministries is a Philippine-based organization passionate about helping families living in ultra poverty, or those who live on less than 50 US cents per person per day. And ICM's heart has been with the ultra poor, and for more than a decade now, we have been working to close this gap by partnering with local pastors to reach the unreached and serve the poorest of the poor. Every year, ICM partners with local pastors to provide programs in order to raise millions out of poverty by empowering the ultra poor through values, health, and livelihood training. However, the recent lockdowns prevented us from traveling to communities and continuing our operations, including our usual M&E fieldwork. But the bigger problem was that the ultra poor, who were already crippled by the lack of access to proper social safety nets, became even more vulnerable to the socioeconomic shocks caused by the pandemic. So aggressive action needed to be taken in order to support these vulnerable communities. However, as it is, our communities, or the communities we serve, already lack the platform to make their voices heard by those who are in a position to help. So how can their stories be heard now that we're unable to physically collect stories and data from the ground? Is there a way to identify and immediately respond to those who are critically in need? We launched the Sentinel Project to capture and amplify the voices of the ultra-poor communities ICM could no longer meet in person. So from late June to December, we repositioned our metrics and data governance coordinators, who usually oversee our physical data collection, to conduct repeated cross-sectional phone surveys on more than 500 partner pastors and savings group leaders from representative municipalities across the Philippines. Sentinel sought to empower these critical and well-positioned faith leaders to be the voices of the ultra-poor, to advocate for their ongoing needs and challenges during this season. So every survey round, our team would ask the leaders about the pandemic's impact on their communities, specifically on their livelihood, church and savings group activities, food security and health, government response, education, healthcare access, and their community's COVID-19 situation. And during this project, our research team closely collaborated with our operations teams to strategically use the information gathered to quickly respond to the communities in need of immediate aid. The surveys also allowed our organization to see the burden that the pastors themselves were bearing during this season, which led us to start a new program specifically to support the most vulnerable pastors in our network of reach. So Sentinel also allowed our research team to strengthen our data validation system by partnering with our operations teams to validate information from the ground and to strengthen our feedback loop by correcting data and updating surveys frequently. However, more than that, we were reminded of the importance of upholding our identity as a faith-based organization while collecting data. Through this project, we sought to embody God's love and serve as ambassadors of hope to the community leaders we were surveying. And because of this, our surveyors saw these phone surveys as opportunities to minister to our local faith leaders by developing genuine friendships with them. So this project allowed us to show our pastors that more than collecting data, we wanted to genuinely hear their stories and how they were coping during this season. We learned that the process of research could also be an avenue of service to the communities and people we are reaching. And by channeling their stories and insights through immediate relief aids, our pastors who initially felt helpless and unable to serve their communities saw the value of surveys and genuinely felt that they were making a difference by serving as ambassadors to their communities during this season. So the up-to-date information we were gathering from the ground also allowed our organization to pivot and recalibrate our programs and relief efforts to better serve our communities, allowing both our partners and internal teams to have a newfound appreciation for the value that M&E contributes to our work with the poor. So these are the key lessons that we learned through the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. Glad that you again shared with us and emphasized the methodological aspect of it, the story collection and the storytelling component of the methodology, and also emphasizing that you managed to bring an empowering aspect into the research or assessment or evaluation that you did. And I think that's an important aspect of this component. As you see, we have some discussion in the chat regarding whether the meal is really Western, non-Western versus indigenous and not Western, how the donor affect this notion of need for evaluation and monitoring. I invite you to also contribute your experience in. Joan Anderson is from Soka Gakkai, International, Japan, of course, and will share with us the third case, and then after that we can have some discussion about this. Thank you again for joining us, Joan. The floor is yours, and your bio will be shared on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, on behalf of myself and my colleagues, I'd just like to thank JLI and in particular Jennifer for including us in this initiative. It's really been an honor to be involved and a great learning process for us. And the compendium, I have been extremely impressed and gained many ideas from it. So as the report indicates, the approach taken by Soka Gakkai International, known as SGI, which is the Buddhist group that I work for, is different, but I found many common approaches and concerns, such as the importance of stories of change, the idea that small change can be important, and valuing people as much as information. And it was interesting to see that the challenges of introducing meal in the Buddhist Jamyang Foundation were a little bit similar to ours in some way, where many things had been built on trust and assumptions of honesty. So when I came to work for SGI from a background with Save the Children, to be honest, it was a relief not to be working in an environment where constantly changing meal demands were coming in from head office and donors all the time. In contrast, SGI raises its own funds And projects are initiated by our independent national organizations in different countries based on needs and resources in those countries. We have a flat structure with local leaders whose role is to provide inspiration and encouragement in a spiritual sense. And there is no donor beneficiary power differential. However, SGI started in Japan, and in East Asian culture generally, leaders are kind of expected to be virtuous and people are expected to trust them. So the concept of accountability has been relatively weak, with little tradition of critical or participatory monitoring or evaluation. But now our international network encompasses many different cultures, and there is definitely more of a demand for example, financial transparency amongst our European and American members. So our challenge is to function as an international network in a way that truly values and recognizes the uniqueness of the different cultures we include. We are primarily a faith organization, like a network of small churches, if you like, and we base our activities on monthly discussion meetings in local communities where individuals can share what we call experiences, which are basically stories of change, and then they receive feedback and encouragement from their fellow members and seniors in faith. We take these stories generally at face value and trust them, the people who deliver them. They are stories of transformation which often include overcoming poverty, illness, and difficulties with human relationships. Our practice is always defined as being for ourselves and for others. And so developing compassion and putting it into action is probably the key positive value within SGI. And we tend to see individuals telling stories of transforming from being victims of their circumstances to becoming empowered individuals who then contribute to building a better community, family, society, or work environment. We also do support projects promoting nuclear disarmament, sustainability, human rights in different countries. And we always stress that one person's actions can make a difference. And in these efforts, we are trying to improve our monitoring and evaluation. But globally, our real contribution is mostly under the radar. It's in these countless micro grassroots kind of incremental stories of change. And we do believe, as I said, that even a small change on a personal level can have great impact. So the question is, how can these kinds of contributions be measured? And I was once involved in analyzing a series of such experiences from our members for a conference on Buddhism and environmentalism in 2013, held at USC. And what I felt I could recognize was a cycle of empowerment, where an individual starts from a situation of deprivation and lack of belief in themselves, through repeated efforts in their practice, through reinforcement from others and study and monthly meetings, they gradually gain more hope and sense of agency and are able to improve their circumstances. And then their contributions over time become more and more significant. And they may, in fact, eventually bring a unique perspective as a Buddhist, and they may help achieve a breakthrough in a particular field. And recently we had a great example in the UK of a webinar called Bodhisattvas for the Earth, of individuals working in the field of the environment. So some academic research has been conducted on our members and the kind of change they initiate and experience, but we are aware of the need to document our approach more thoroughly, and we're always open to receiving ideas. And we have much to learn, but I would like to thank you very much for involving us in this very important initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan, for the brief description, and I think capturing the grassroots micro work, one-to-one, and the power of the story and the change on one individual. I think you also shared with us the principles, the Buddhist principles guiding the work, your work as well, and the organization, and put lots of values on that. Would be interesting maybe later on if we can have time to delve more into your question, and maybe with example about measuring the effect and the impact, capturing those into a macro or a meso level, mid-level. But thank you again. Allow me to move to our two discussants who will also reflect with us. But please remember to put your questions and comment on chat, and our team at JLI will pass them along as well. Starting with the 5 minutes with Jessica Baumgardner-Zuzik. Allow me, I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly. Senior Director, Learning and Evaluation Alliance for Peacebuilding in the US as well. Your bio will be posted, so the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you so much to JLI and our esteemed panelists, Mohammed Abu-Nimer, of course, our moderator, and my fellow discussant. You know, the compendium writ large is really a thought-provoking and well-curated resource. It highlights not only limitations, but particularly focuses on what I would say are solutions and how faith actors and organizations are overcoming some of these barriers to entry that we see for them, particularly in relation to meal. You know, I think writ large, there's been an adoption and understanding that local solutions are fundamental to solving local problems. And the peacebuilding field, development field, humanitarian field writ large, they still though are struggling with how to engage robustly with local partners, particularly integrating them into the design, implementation, and evaluation processes of programs. And this is felt even more strongly when working in partnership with faith actors, where there tends to be an ongoing reticence, particularly by government and, you know, we see it in the USG, other Western donors in Europe, to really, I think, dip their feet into this work, whether this comes from the Establishment Clause in the United States or more of a secular nature for governance. You know, this exists and this tension is real. You know, the compendium really notes these tensions that are related to local and international partnerships for meal. And I would argue that they're actually shared across peacebuilding organizations writ large that I engage with every day, even larger international NGOs. We see lack of funding for capacity building, lack of ongoing support and development, unfair expectations on delivering, you know, preconceived ideals of success, way too short of timelines to achieve what we're looking to in these types of programming, and these limited type of participatory engagements that work to create effective buy-in from donors to implementers to beneficiaries. Those very critical human components that we know lend themselves to success are often what are left out most importantly. We also see that there are often these unbalanced distinctions on what needs to be reported and evaluated to donors, really weighed against the cost and benefit considerations for generating that evidence. I've seen that in the chats. I've heard that from our panelists. You know, these include questions of capacity, human resources, let alone actual cost resources and funding. And it really has created a situation where we push the brunt of data collection onto already overburdened implementers or practitioners. We see this further exacerbated when we start to consider questions of power dynamics and negotiating power when someone ultimately is holding the purse strings. Within the compendium, we talk about more locally or community funded programming, but we all have a certain responsibility to those whom are supporting our missions and our help. And that does create different shifts in power. We also have this question, you know, on whom does the burden of proof lie? Whose ultimate responsibility is it to demonstrate impact and its implications on programming? And we know that time and effort, which is spent in data collection and extensive development of meal processes, inevitably is time and effort not spent on implementing these critical programs. So from these, you know, while these trade-offs are made from donors, from international partners, you know, often there is very little discussion or consideration from the organizations who are going to be implementing this work, let alone the beneficiaries. And this creates a lot of these ongoing tensions. You know, thinking through what I would argue is, you know, often resulting from more linguistic or capacity barriers that are creating a situation where what donors want often seems at odds with what implementers value. And what is good enough often gets in the way or gets lost amongst what's expected with imperfect conditions. So I think, you know, in really kind of summarizing this compendium, a critical contribution that it makes is providing an opportunity to translate some of these distinctions more clearly for an international donor and partner base through these case studies. I always tell people that it's way easier to critique than create, particularly in the realm of MEL. So the more examples that individuals have as implementers looking for innovative ways to monitor and evaluate, or to donors who are learning about different locally driven meal approaches, this can help shift the conversation and potentially the process away from exclusively Western or secular approaches. I think that investing resources and sharing this information more broadly, and I would recommend hosting conversations between donors and practitioners in particular, is where I would focus the next steps of this research. Seeking opportunities to help break down silos and bridge those gaps that are often created between local and international stakeholders to promote these stronger local international meal partnerships. This would require radical changes, both from the donors and from the actors, but I think it's critical to promote and translate Eastern, Southern, and/or faith-based ways of thinking about accountability and effectiveness more consistently into the meal conversation.
Thank you.
To highlight that it's not to focus on classifying this in Western versus non-Western, but to broaden those definitional boundaries of what meal constitutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for expanding the conversation beyond the dichotomy of Western and non-Western as well. It has also been mentioned in the chat, but also for putting the next steps or frontier towards further research on accountability as well. So thank you again, Jessica. Hamayoon Sultan from the UK, independent consultant, also has experience in humanitarian affairs and peacebuilding. The bio will be on the chat. Thank you for being our discussant. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you to JLI, especially Jennifer, Stacey, Jessica, and everyone has spoken today as well. It's all been very, very useful. Thank you for inviting me to be a discussant in this. I've read the resource. It's a very, very useful resource. I'm thankful that it's actually there. I mean, one of the key questions that was asked earlier on, it's sort of why do we do evaluations? It's of course for learning. It's not just to satisfy donors, of course, but without the donors, we wouldn't be able to do this. So it's important, but it's not just accountability to them. It's also accountability to those who we are serving. And so that's why it's about the communities who we are serving. And now we have to look at who are the communities who we are serving. And often we do find that they are strong in their faith. They're faithful. And their outlook, their entire world outlook, local, domestic, global, is determined by their faith. And so if we are serving them, if we are implementing humanitarian and development projects to serve them, then of course their faith, the way they understand their faith has to be important. And we have to consider it within that framework as well. So of course that it's accountability to them. So we have to be able to ask, what do the community want? What do they feel? Does it even tally with our assumptions? And this is where it comes into an experience that I had a while ago. I was still a very sort of green, wet behind the ears evaluator. I'd flown into Pakistan, driven into the mountains of Kashmir. I was evaluating. And of course, I was very early in my career. I turned up with a whole set of assumptions as to what I thought the project was supposed to achieve. And at the end of a 45-minute discussion, I realized that everything was completely wrong. I mean, I thought empowerment, in the way that I saw it, was about allowing the female beneficiaries who we were serving to be able to get into the workplace, to be able to work, to be able to earn money, as it were. But as I got deeper into this, I realized that it wasn't actually what she was concerned about. Her main impact, and this is before I learned about most significant change, but the main impact that she came out with for the project was that she could now sit with her daughter and be able to educate her, to be able to work with her. She was happy with the amount of money she earned. She didn't want to earn any more. It didn't seem to matter. It was about that she now had time to sit with her daughter and help her with her schoolwork, rather than having to walk 2-3 hours a day to get water. That for me was a complete sort of change in my outlook as well, in the way that I do my work as an evaluator, because it taught me that I have to think of things from their perspective. What does change mean to the people we are serving, not to the way that we've designed our project, the way that we think something should be achieved. It's very important. Language, of course, is culturally biased, and a lot of faith assumptions are built into language. I mean, I myself have two mother languages, Urdu, Punjabi. My English is native level. I was educated in the UK. Yet even if I were to go to Pakistan and try to communicate to someone in English, I know that I would not be able to communicate what I want to say with the same faith assumptions that I know I want to do in my maternal language in English. I just can't do it, even though I was born and raised in the UK, because there are all sorts of assumptions tied into language, both cultural, faith, and everything else. So it's one of the things we have to consider. How do we use language? And how do we go about it? And then we get into sort of, we were talking about secular and faith-based tools. Of course, there are tools as well. So we have qual versus quants, but we also have what might be called secular tools. We have outcome harvesting, we have most significant change, appreciative inquiry. They're all very, very useful. You don't have to use them in a secular way. You can use them in of course, there are specific faith-based tools. Nateerfan's light wheel is fantastic. And I've used it before, it's superb. But also we have other tools that can be used within a faith context. And of course, one of the things that the compendium raises is also the issue of impartiality. The people always talk about evaluations have to be impartial, and so we need to do it in a different way. But of course, we have to ask, is anyone impartial? As an evaluator going to another country, would I necessarily be more impartial, given that the way I understand things are tied up in the way I saw the world, see the world, the way I was brought up, the way I understand language, both English and the other thing as well. It's one of the key things we have to look at, definitely. And so language definitely is very important. And I know I'm running out of time. I got
thank you.
I didn't have a great deal of time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Hamayoon. Thank you. Thank you, Hamayoon, for raising several of those points. Obviously, the language as a carrier for possible assumptions, faith assumption that you also shared your own assumption that you carried earlier on your career in one of your evaluation. And I think that the points you raised regarding impartiality or even neutrality, as some still believe, absolutely on the mark, that no one can be absolutely impartial or absolutely neutral at all. These are good points to think about them, and also you related them to Compendium. Thank you. Thank you for the speakers and for the discussant. We come to the portion of the webinar where we look at some of the questions as well. And I need to see if we have in the chat any questions by Jennifer or colleagues from JLI. Can you please let me know via chat if there is any specific question, or I can move with the question I have here from earlier on. Use of numbers as opposed to Western. Yeah, so maybe I think this is a good way to go back to our speakers as well, and speak about this notion of difference between Western and Western dichotomy that was made earlier on and has been discussed in the literature, but also in the use of number statisticals. Is one of the differences is again the use of statistics, numbers in terms of evaluation or not. But even a broader question, if you can reflect on this notion of differences in approach by evaluator, whether they come from the north, the south, west, east, as well as if they come from indigenous, non-indigenous, and if you wanna even expand it, the issue of why insiders and outsider evaluation. I'd like to go back just for maybe 1 minute from each of the from Marie Dao. How does that work in terms of the tools you have used, as well as Daryn and Joan? Go back to you for 1 minute reflection on this question of cultural and religious differences and West and East in dealing with this. Marie, do you have any comment on that? Have you faced this in Adyan? Marie, are you still with us?
Unfortunately, I don't think so.
Okay, so we can go to Daryn. Daryn, Do you have any, Daryn, do you have any reflection on this?
So we're talking about the balance between meal and implementation. Is that correct?
In some ways, you're in Philippines, and then you have what tools do you use? Are these tools European, American, Japanese, Chinese, or are they indigenous Filipino from the tribe people? What the methodology you use, is it really Western or non-Western? Is that at all relevant to the type of work you do in Philippines?
Yeah, I think it's a really relevant question to our organization. So I think most of the time the tools we use do come from Western organizations. So we have adopted some of these questionnaires and surveys and even indices to our surveys for our communities. And some of the things we've noticed is that there are some questions that might not be too sensitive for perhaps like Western communities, but when we bring it into our Filipino context, it is quite sensitive, or some of them do not even apply to them. So one of the things we really had to wrestle with in coming in with our surveys is to really speak with our enumerators and always constantly get feedback from them as they interact with our participants, because we do understand that for most of the people, surveying is quite an inconvenience, or some of them may feel that it is too sensitive to talk about. So we do really practice sensitivity and really just giving them this space of surveying to be an opportunity for ministry more than for just data collection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. I'll go to Joan Anderson. Do you have any reflection on this question?
I think it's actually very interesting to think about this, because I realize as I'm listening that there are some Japanese, elements of Japanese culture that have come into our organization, even though it's an international network, and things like people still write handwritten reports in Japan, and that's taken as a great sign of sincerity to write things by hand, for example, which is an extraordinary thing in today's world. And there is a tendency, I think, in Japanese culture also to celebrate success and want to hear about success. And sometimes it's harder to find a way to deal with issues or things that are not going so well. So that's something that I realize is quite an interesting cultural issue in terms of how we deal with challenges. And of course, internationally, we have very different standards of the way people like to discuss things. And that is even seen within we have the same discussion format globally, but the way it operates is very different in cultures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne-Marie. We'll pick up another set of questions, I think, by Clements, and they were posted in the discussion. And really two of them. One is, which is a typical challenge for evaluation in general in this field and also in other fields. How do we balance between we want to implement, at the same time we want to do meal or evaluation, monitoring and accounting? How do we solve this tension between the two and the perception that if we do evaluation, this will affect our capacity to implement as well? The second question, if you want to reflect on it, the three of you have talked about storytelling and the story documentation, the stories of the success. And one of the questions is, how do you convince Western donors with the value and validity and the significance of stories, collection stories and narrating stories as a tool for success? And the question is assuming that Western methodologies rely on statistics and not stories. Any reflection on that? We'll come back to you, and Maria Dao, if you are back.
Yes, I am, and I actually can answer both of these questions. And I see that Steffi also answered the Clemence in the same way that I will do. Whenever you have limited resources, and this is the case we have at Adyan, either on the financial or on the human resources level regarding meal, because meal is something really general and it needs a lot of resources. What you can try to do is balance between implementation and meal in the way of including meal within the implementation of your activities. For example, as I was telling you, the sharing of stories of change was done by the beneficiaries themselves. So having someone within the project itself try to get these types of information, or even, for example, the focus groups that we did in order as an activity in the overall project, and it was basically Adyan's team taking care of it. So whenever one has limited resources, and especially that also we have a year to implement the whole project, so also we have the time frame, and we always try as much as possible to find this balance between both. So this is why involving the beneficiaries is really important. Regarding the question of the stories of change, I mean, in our case, it is something that they view as important. I mean, the stories of change. And the way to convince donors is to focus these stories of change on the log frame that was originally developed for them. So always whenever you are presenting a certain story of change, try to link it back to the outcome of the project, to the theory of change, to the outcome and the impact and the outputs that you mentioned in your actual log frame. This way, donors can see, or it would be proof for donors that these stories of change are linking back to the change that we were talking about in our TOC or in our log frame.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Joan or Daryn, any reflection on this? Maybe Daryn, 1 minute, because we really need to move to the next steps. Daryn, do you have any closing sentence on this?
Yes, I think something interesting with our organization is that whenever we do develop meal frameworks, we always keep into account what the donors think, what the beneficiaries are looking for, and what our internal teams also need. So whenever we create this, we already have these different goals in mind in our framework. So because of that, things like the stories of change are some of the things that the donors do look for, because we have this sort of expectation setting with them, and we also constantly report to them some of the things that are happening in our communities regularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. Last word to Joan. Any reflection on the storytelling as well as on the donors' attitude on this?
I guess my only last thing would be to say that for us, stories actually have a very powerful inspirational impact. And that's something we're very conscious of, that one person's story can really help and encourage someone else facing a similar challenge to see that perhaps it is possible to find a way through. That would just be my final point, to give hope.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan. Thank you. Thank you all for your for the discussant as well as for the presenters. Thank you for the information, lessons, and also some reflection on possible questions and the future research even. Thank you as well to that and for the question. I think we had a rich conversation in the chat as well. I urge you to look at it in that if you have the time as well. And I'm sure this will be also posted later on. Jennifer, back to you, and Stacy, back to you with your next steps, and if you want to do the Menti.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mohammed, and thank you to the speakers and panelists. We only have a couple of minutes left, but we would really like to hear from everyone. I was going to say in the room, but it's not a room, in the Zoom. We'd love to hear from all of you what you think would be some important next steps for the Meal and Faith Hub. So we've come up with a couple of ideas here. If you could please go to the website menti.com and then use the code on the top 9302696. Stacy had also shared it in the chat. And you will then see that you have 100 brownie points that you can distribute between the different options. These are just some of the things that we had in mind. If you have some other ideas, there will be a second question in a minute, but we thought we'd start with that. And I can see people are already sharing. Let's take a couple of more seconds to see if anyone else would like to add their perspectives. You can, oh, there's a question in the chat, so you can give a minimum of 10 points per question and a maximum of 100. You don't need to use up all the points. So if you feel that some of the options don't make any sense, just skip them. If you want to give all 100 to one of them, go for it.
Jennifer, maybe you want to repost the link if some other people are not able to go to the link. If you have a link on the chat for the Menti.
Yeah, Stacy has just, thank you, Mohammed. Stacy has just shared the link again.
Thank
and it's
you.
also on top, it's also on top of the slide, menti.com. And then you need to enter the code, which Stacy has also just posted again in the chat. So it looks like continued shared learning across organizations is what people find most interesting. Some also see value in disseminating results from the study. Then there are a few who want to either generate more stories of change and build this database that we basically have now, but add more stories of change and add focusing on more diversity. So we have Christian organizations, we have Islamic organizations, Buddhist organizations represented, but there's obviously a much broader range of faith actors. Okay, are we moving to the second question? This is the second question. Yeah, so now I told you we have an open-ended question as well. And the open-ended question, again, you can go to menti.com, you use the code. Now you can just put in whatever you think would be interesting for the JLI Hub to work on. With you as an organization or just in general, work that would be useful for you. Okay, so we have peer reviews, Meal Hub meetings, and videos. Yeah, these do take place at the moment regularly. So please do sign up to the JLI Meal Hub on the JLI website. You can go on the homepage and then from there click your way through the learning hubs and then to the Meal Hub. It's free to join, so it doesn't cost anything. We meet roughly every 2 months. Stacy has just shared the link where you can go straight to the Meal Hub on the JLI website. Okay, so there are some interesting options there. Capacity building opportunities, sharing of resources, so there's less duplication of efforts. That's an important point. Share more methodological best practices. There are some in the compendium, which has been posted on the JLI website. Very, very exciting. Please do take a look. It's out now, so you can read through it in detail. What else do we have? Learning calls on specific topics. That's basically what we're doing in the Meal Hub. So if you haven't already, you might want to join the hub and then you'll receive regular updates about the meetings where we share learning between organizations. Produce joint M&E guides on key topics. That's interesting. It would be good for us to know which topics you would be interested in. So please, yeah, be in touch. Don't be shy. Shoot us an email. And we really, at the moment, we are at a stage where we're thinking about next steps and where do we want to take the work of the Meal Hub. So now is really the best time to be in touch. If you have any ideas, even if it's still at the brainstorming stage, that's absolutely fine, because we're still brainstorming ourselves. Just be in touch. What else do we say? Meal Hub Brownback virtual lunches. Okay, so that would basically be an extension of the meetings that the Meal Hub is already doing, but maybe with a slightly different format. What else do we have? More research. As a researcher, I like that. Donor and practitioner meeting, that's a really good point too, because in this compendium, we haven't really focused on the donor perspective. We have looked at what local faith actors and international organizations, what is important to them. But then there's obviously also the donors. Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. We will keep note of all of these. And then, as I mentioned, we're working on possible next steps at the moment. If you have any ideas, just be in touch. Our contact details are on the JLI website, if we haven't been in touch already as part of this work. Yeah, I think on that note,
thank you. So should we close this?
We've run 5 minutes over, which as a German hurts me incredibly, but it's been such an interesting conversation. So I think it's good, and perhaps people can forgive us for running over time a little bit.
It's okay. The non-German of us are not in so much
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Mohammed.